And then finally, one of the big issues in this year's Washington Supreme Court races is how the court handles tax related cases as a constitutional challenge to the state's new income tax as that moves forward toward the bench. It's going to be at least a year, maybe more. Voters may well actually have an initiative to consider as early as this fall's ballot. More to come on that later this week. But in position 7, we have former King County Public Defender Kareem Merchant challenging Chief Justice Deborah Stevens, who authored the court's majority opinion. Deborah Stevens did in the case called Quinn v. State. And that was the 2023 ruling that upheld Washington's capital gains tax. Now, opponents argued the tax was an unconstitutional income tax, but the court ruled it was to be considered an excise tax and was not in conflict with our state constitution. Now, Merchant says that distinction matters a great deal because it increases the legislature's tax authority. And my colleague, Tim Clauser, specifically asked Merchant, candidate for that position, what he thinks the court and Chief Justice Stevens may have gotten wrong.
In State versus Quinn, the court upheld Washington's capital gains tax. You've referenced it a little bit by ruling it was an excise tax rather than an income tax, like the opponents had argued. What did you make of that ruling, and what, if anything, do you think that your opponent got wrong, or your opponent in the majority got wrong in that?
The legislature has complete discretion for excise taxes. They can tax that to the moon. They have the ability to tax, and there's nothing that can stop them from doing an excise tax, which is generally a tax on the benefit of being able to use something or on a transaction of some kind. So a great example of that is like we have the privilege of using a car. So they can tax anything to do with a car, whether it's gas, whether it's car tabs, they have the ability to do that. That's their prerogative, and that's completely within their constitutional authority. But they are incredibly limited on their ability to tax on property. And the Quinn decision determined that capital gains are not income. It's an excise tax. And you need to step back and just reasonably think about this one concept. It's just basic business concept. When you are buying and selling, when I buy something for $2 and I turn around and sell it for $3, I have a $1 profit. I have a $1 gain. The Supreme Court is saying that that $1 gain is not income. The IRS sees it differently. And so that's the biggest point, that they said that that a capital gain is not income. Right? That blows me away just on the threshold matter of it, and just disregarding the fact of what the fact that the IRS thinks it doesn't matter what the IRS defines it as, it's what we define it as. And so that kind of took me back for a second. But then we start thinking about, is this an excise tax? And well, if it taxes the transaction, yeah, 100% it would be an excise tax. But guess what? It only taxes the transaction when there's a gain. It doesn't tax the transaction when you break even. It doesn't tax the transaction when there's a loss. So is that really an excise tax? And anytime, it takes like 52 pages to be able to explain that, you have to really go through and bury it. And it's just a lot to go through. You have to unpack it because it's trickery. I think that, it's 52 pages long to be able to explain why capital gains are not income, why property is not income. Sorry, why capital gains are not property. But then Justice Gordon MacLeod Justice Gordon MacLeod and Justice Johnson, who is retiring this year, in their dissent, the next 19 words, it's just so logical. And it just completely debunks everything that the Chief Justice had wrote in the previous 52 pages. And it's capital gains are income, incomes are property. Therefore, I knew I was going to blow the third line, but I'll let you guys read it and find out. But it flows logically, and I think the Supreme Court got that one wrong.
So again, we are less than 6 weeks from the August 4th primary here in the state of Washington, when the field of candidates for these Supreme Court races are going to be narrowed down to two. We have a top two primary. That means, regardless of any political affiliation for any position, the top two vote getters then advance on to the November general election. So that's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. It's the last day of the month, June 30th. We ring in July tomorrow, and I hope you will join us again on Wednesday. Have a great day.